So the first step is going to be to drain the coolant. Now you see I do have the car jacked up here a little bit. That's just to make it easier. Draining the coolant on these cars is so easy you could do it without jacking the car up. Once you have your catch bucket underneath, you can literally reach down from above and unscrew the drain plug in the bottom of the radiator. It's really easy. There's lots of room to get your arm down there. While the coolant is draining, I'm going to start removing the things I need to remove in order to gain access to the thermostat housing, starting with the air filter cover, and then I'm going to move this air intake hose out of the way. The next thing to remove is this big wire harness here. It's attached to a bracket with a fastener, and that's the next thing we're going to need to remove so we can pull that harness out of the way. With that unfastened, we can now move this big wire harness, and here's a trick to keep it out of your way. Grab a bungee cord and hook one end to the harness and the other end up to the front of your car. I think this is the easiest way to keep that harness kind of up and out of your way without undoing all of the infinity harness connections it has. Next, I'm going to disconnect this sensor connection on top of the thermostat housing. The coolant's had plenty of time to drain by this point, so we're going to go ahead and remove the lower rad hose next. Even though we've drained the coolant, you still are going to want to move your catch pan to underneath the thermostat area because there is still going to be some residual coolant that comes out when we pull off the hose. And now we can pull the lower rad hose off the thermostat housing. With the hose out of the way, we're going to start by taking out the top bolt on the thermostat housing. That's the easy one, of course. Here we go. Next we need to remove this bracket. I actually originally thought that this bolt was the lower thermostat housing bolt and it went through this bracket and the thermostat housing, but actually that's not true. There's a third bolt underneath that, but in order to get at that bolt, this bracket still has to come off. That bottom one was shockingly loose, so I think someone has had this off before and had a hard time tightening that. So maybe this isn't the first time a thermostat's been done on this car. Alright, so I thought there was only 2 bolts, but there is another one. So this one here that was holding on this little bracket thing, I can feel another one below it. So that one is, oh boy, that's going to be fun. Here's a good image of the thermostat housing so you can see what's going on. Upper thermostat housing bolt was here. This is the bracket, and this is the bolt that we just took out of the bracket. To remove this bracket completely out of the way to access the lower bolt, we also need to unclip this harness that is going past here, which is connected to the bracket with a clip. So to get at that bottom bolt there, which is way down there, which we can't see, I need to move this bracket thing. Basically take it off this hose down here so I can pull it out of the way. I had to undo this clip. I used this pick thing, shoved it in there to loosen it so I could pull it away. Now I can pull this bracket off the hose. Now we can get at that lower bolt. I can't show you it, you can't see it, you just got to feel for it. I've been able to get my socket on it there. You're either going to need a deep socket or a regular socket with a short extension, preferably a narrow one, and there you see I just cracked it loose. By this point it was clear that some hack had been in here before, but here's something I noticed in editing. Look at this thermostat, they didn't even have it installed correctly. This pin is supposed to point upwards. Here's the new thermostat, there's the pin, and make sure that you've got a new seal properly fitted around the thermostat. When reinstalling the housing, you'll want to have one bolt, either the top or bottom one, kind of already fed through so that it has something to hold it in place, and then you'll just kind of hand tighten that bolt and then put in the other bolt, hand tighten that, and then go back and torque them both down. You don't need to crazily over tighten these, just tighten them to about a firm hold foot-pounds. Here it's a little hard to see, but I'm reinstalling that bracket onto the thermostat housing. Now slipping the rad hose back on with a new hose clamp, of course. From here it's pretty much just reassembly of everything and then refill and bleed the coolant. So I'll speed this part up, and then for those of you that haven't bled coolant before, I will walk you through how to do that. Start off by adding just a little bit of coolant to make sure it's not leaking and the funnel kit actually is sealed. Then you can add a little bit more at a time, and you're gonna have to wait a little bit for it to gurgle down and fill up the radiator. Once the radiator is pretty much full and it's not really gurgling down too much anymore, have your funnel filled to about half, maybe 40%, and then go start the car. Basically now we're just going to run the car and make sure it gets up to the proper temperature and doesn't overheat. Let the coolant bleed down into everywhere that it needs to be. We got to make sure the thermostat opens. Also, you'll want to turn your heat on so that you can verify the coolant is in the heater core and the heat blows warm. So the level just abruptly dropped a little bit there, so the thermostat opened, which is good. Pop her back up. And now basically we're just going to run the engine, periodically topping up the funnel as it drops until the vehicle is at full operating temperature and we've verified that it's not overheating. The level isn't dropping anymore, your heat is blowing warm, and the coolant in the funnel isn't really bubbling anymore.